Hello again, and welcome back to Eco 204. I'm Dr. Wood. I hope you know that at this point. And now we're going to talk about monopolistic competition. So chapter 15 here, we will define what monopolistic competition is, what its characteristics are. We're going to look at demand and marginal revenue for the firm within this market structure. We're going to look at how they behave so as to maximize profits, the goal of the firm. Then we're going to get into the long run and see how that differs from the short run and compare monopolistic competition to perfect competition that we just studied in Chapter 12. And then we're going to look at how firms in this market structure have a little bit of power to stave off the long run and at least try and fight off the inevitable long run that will be coming. So monopolistic competition, and I'll call it mon-comp sometimes, or in our titles for our graphs for short. This is a market structure in which ease of entry is high, where barriers to entry are low. Those two things mean exactly the same thing. It's just some authors put it in terms of the ease of entry, and other authors put it in terms of the barriers to entry. So monopolistic competition, we have ease of entry being quite high. That means that if you put your mind to it, I believe in you. You could start a firm in a monopolistically competitive market. There are going to be many firms selling differentiated products. So this is going to be different from perfect competition in basically three ways. There's going to be generally some kind of a hurdle to jump to join the market. There's going to be fewer firms, but still plenty. And products are now going to be differentiated or heterogeneous rather than identical and homogeneous as in perfect competition when all products are exactly the same. So what that means is products are similar, but not exactly identical. If you think of, say, restaurants, we could go out tonight for American or Chinese or Korean or French or Italian or English or Spanish or Greek or Lebanese. Within a country, we can go out, if we go out for Chinese food, we can go out for Cantonese or Northern Chinese food. There's a lot of different types of restaurants. They all sell food, but they all have a specifically differentiated type of food. The menu is at least somewhat unique and appealing to a certain person's taste. That could be you, that could be me, it doesn't matter. Just it's specifically tailored in a slightly different way than the other restaurants in town. But there's still how many restaurants in Tampa? Thousands? It's true. There's a lot. So here's back to our table of different types of market structures. We started with perfect competition here, very many firms, identical products, free ease of entry. And now we're moving a step over, looking at this monopolistically competitive market structure. Still very competitive, but there's going to be kind of fewer firms, and the most important part is the products are now differentiated. So again, every type of bar is a little bit different. You could have a sports bar or a cocktail bar or a speakeasy. They're all a little different with a different menu and a different theme and a different, trying to tailor it to a different clientele each time. The ease of entry, though, here is high, or barriers to entry are low, meaning, again, if you want to enter this market, you can. Speaking of bars, could you open one if you wanted to? Yeah, probably. I bet you could go to the bank, get a loan, get that started. Is there a barrier to entry? Yeah, you have to get a liquor license. You've got to go to the bank. You've got to do all these maybe headachy type things to get your firm up and running. But I believe any of you could do exactly that. Yeah, you guys can do it. I believe in you. All right, so let's get into the economics of what this is. This firm is no longer a price taker. That is, this firm, if it wants to, has some kind of price influence. No longer a price taker. If you're not a price taker, your individual firm's demand curve is no longer horizontal. You now do not have perfectly elastic demand, but instead your demand curve is, in some respect, downward sloping. What that means is, not just at the market level, but now at the firm level too, you are able to cut your price and increase your quantity demanded. Or, of course, raise your price and reduce your quantity demanded. So, sales looking a little not good. You have the power now to cut the price and increase the number of sales that you make. You could raise your price and not lose every sale. So when it comes to the perfectly competitive firm, right, if you raised your price, you lost all your business. If you lowered your price, you already could have sold all you wanted at the present quantity or at the present price. For, say, a restaurant, if they raise their price a nickel, they're probably not going to lose every single one of their consumers. Maybe someone's going to notice that on the menu and be like, ugh, right, and not come back. But for the most part, it's going to be okay. And you could probably lower your price a little bit and draw in extra consumers too. What that means, in addition, is that no longer are the demand and marginal revenue curve the same curve. Not only is demand not horizontal, but now marginal revenue is going to break apart from the demand curve, and they're going to be two separate curves. So marginal revenue is actually going to be downward sloping and below the demand curve. At the very first unit we sell, price and marginal revenue will be the same, right? If we sell our first unit, say we set our first price at $10 and we sell one unit, in monopolistic competition, we know that in order to sell more units, we'd have to cut the price to $9.50 to $9. When we do that, though, two effects happen that make our marginal revenue below our demand. There's a counteracting effect. There's an output effect and an income effect. We've talked about these two effects already. But to refresh, the output effect is when we cut the price to increase quantity demanded, we get more revenue from selling more units. That makes lots of sense. We cut the price and we're able to now bring in more sales. That brings in more money. But there is a counteracting effect called the income effect. And this is why marginal revenue is less than demand. Once you start cutting the price to increase the quantity demanded, you now can't sell the previous units at their original higher price. You have to take a loss that's called the income effect. That is, there's less revenue from selling each of the items that you could have sold at the higher price. So you're adding an output effect, you're taking away an income effect, and because you're taking away that income effect, your additional revenue, your marginal revenue, will be less than your demand or your price. Okay? Marginal revenue then is the result, the culmination of output and income effects. So let's first draw this conceptually, and then I will give us an example. So first, let's make a drawing. Make sure you're on the screen. How's that? We can make it all bigger. All right, let's say we have a monopolistically competitive firm. So we're looking at one company in a monopolistically competitive market. Be in a good habit here. I'm going to put price, revenues, and costs, all things that we monetize that have a dollar value, we measure on the y-axis. And then, of course, quantity on the x-axis. Excellent. All right. So because we are in a monopolistically competitive market, we now have a downward sloping demand curve. Not just at the market level, but for the individual company as well. Now let's think about what happens if we want to garner more sales and how that will affect our marginal revenue, our additional revenue we get from selling additional units. So let's say we have some price. Let's call it P high. It's a high price. What does that tell us when we have demand? Put in a price and it spits out a what to us? Quantity demanded. Correct. All right. Where's my total revenue? You know, right? that total revenue is price times quantity. So it's price times quantity. It is all of this rectangle. Correct? All right. That's our initial revenue. Now we want to see how revenue changes as we change our production. So in order to get more of these consumers, there's somebody who really wants our good, there's somebody who doesn't care so much. Right now we're not selling to any of these people. If we want to get them involved, we're going to have to cut the price, right? For the sake of simplicity, let's just call it PL for price less or lower, or low. We know that this does something for us. We put in that price, and we get quantity demanded high, right? We get a new total revenue too, that is price low times quantity demanded high. So now it's all this rectangle. We have now added something and lost something. These are the output and income effects. When we've cut the price to some more stuff, we've picked up this rectangle. This here's the output effect. This is us gaining additional revenue from selling more stuff, right? Where our total revenue was here, we've now made it here and added this rectangle. In the process, though, we've given up this rectangle. We've lost the income effect. When we've made this change, we are now no longer getting this amount. We can't sell QD high number of units at the high price. So we have to make a trade-off like everything. In order to make this gain of output effect, we have to take the L here with the income effect. So marginal revenue is the culmination of output effect minus income effect. The difference between the two. So what does that mean? It means that my marginal revenue cannot be the same as the price. After I sell a first unit, it means that every time I go along here and add a new unit, I'm going to be giving up something in terms of income effect. So while I am adding revenue, there is a loss in terms of marginal revenue will be downward sloping and below the demand curve. Downward sloping and below the demand curve, because every time we move along the demand curve to a new quantity demanded, this gain we get in output effect will, in some part, either in a small way or in a large way, depending on where we are on the demand curve, as we'll see when we do actual numbers here. We could be adding a lot of additional revenue, zero additional revenue, or negative additional revenue. But it will always be somewhat less than price due to those two counteracting effects. Let's do a specific example. All right, now let's derive demand and marginal revenue for a monopolistic competitive company. So I've got an example here. I feel you can use the pause button to gather this data. We've got quantity, price, total revenue, average revenue, marginal revenue. That's a lot of revenue, and that'll make you happy at a firm. Total cost, which I'm giving you, of course, marginal cost, average total cost, and profit. For now, we're going to start with kind of these first 3 blank columns, and then we'll add some more in a little bit. So, how do we calculate our total revenue? Price times quantity. Awesome. So, in order to calculate our total revenue, we just need to go 0 times 7 is 0. 1 times 650 is 650. 2 times 6 is, I can do this one, 12. 3 times 550 is 1650. 4 times 5 is 20. 5 times 4 is 2250. 6 times 4 is 24. 7 times 350 is 2450. 8 times 3 is 24. 9 times 250 is 2250. I love how this comes back down, perfect. And 10 times 2 is 20. So that gives us our total revenue, which that's just review for us. Awesome. Hi.
Sorry.
You good? You want to come in? All right, sorry. We're making new friends here after hours at the Cobb with the staff. Okay. We'll edit all this out later. Okay. Next, average revenue. Average revenue is sometimes stated, and it is simply total revenue divided by quantity. So my average revenue is going to be 7 divided by 0 is blank. 650 divided by 1 is 650. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Wait, what's going on here? Every time this is the what? This is the price. Average revenue tells you, I mean, you just say price, so I guess it sounds kind of pretentious, but what it's doing is telling you what revenue you bring in per unit based on the price the firm sets. So it gives you just a little bit of context to go, if I set my price of $7, I'm going to bring in $7 a unit. If I set my price at $3, I'm going to bring in $3 a unit. It's the revenue you bring in per unit. So I just wanted to throw that out there because we haven't talked about it the rest of the semester, and we can think about it in terms of marginal revenue. Our calculation for marginal revenue, we've done this a few times now, is just the change in total revenue over the change in quantity. So I'll do the first one for a reminder, and then I'll let you do the rest for practice. As my quantity goes from 0 to 1 in terms of what we're producing, my total revenue goes from 0 to 650. So my change in revenue as I change my production is 650 minus 0 over 1 minus 0, and that's just 650. You know what? Let's change colors. For associative learning, it's 650. That's a little cloudy on the screen, isn't it? Let's make it better. Okay. Next, as I change my production from 1 to 2 units, my revenue goes from 650 to 12. So I'll make that subtraction and get 550. In fact, what's happening here? In this case, given a linear demand curve, there's going to be a pattern to my decrease in marginal revenue. As I make each next unit my marginal revenue is going to go down by $1. To the point where if I make a 10th unit, I'm going to add negative 250 in my revenues. Okay? All right. Let's use this information to look at the firm's demand curve and now build on that and get to a marginal revenue curve. So let's model this. Actually, let's do the following. We are going to produce between 0 and 10 units. I can get everything on the board at once there. Cool. So let's start at 0 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's call this Moncom firm, demand, and marginal revenue. And we're going to build on this chart and the graph and model this firm in general. So I'm going to put price and revenues now, because we're dealing with demand and price, and marginal revenue. Bring in more revenue as we make more stuff. And I'm going to add costs. It's a little foreshadowing as to where we're going from here. All right. So let's take a gander at demand and marginal revenue and what they look like. So we plotted a bunch of demand curves. And at the firm level, it's easy. All we're going to need to do is go from 0 to 7 for our demand curve. Our marginal revenue, though, dips into the negatives. So we're going to need to plot this down to negative $3, it looks like. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then down to negative 1, negative 2, and negative 3. Okay? All right, let's plot that demand now. So first two columns. When the price is 7, no one is willing and able to buy. When the price is cut to 650, though, we're going to be able to move 1 unit. That's visible, it looks like. When we cut the price further to increase quantity demand, and we're just going to keep stepping along the demand curve. So if we cut another 50 cents down to $6, we're going to induce a second buyer. At 550, it'll be 3. At 5, it'll be 4. Let's make sure these are doing okay. At 450, we'll get 5. At 4, we'll get 6. 350, we'll get 7. 3, we'll get 8. At 50, we'll get 9. And at 2, we'll get a demand, quantity demanded rather, of 10. All right, so let's play our favorite game of all time. And let's connect the dots for our demand curve that is downward sloping. And let's label that as we do with D for demand. Cool. Now, let's think about what our marginal revenue is going to look like. All right, let's now plot marginal revenue. Marginal revenue is simply at every quantity marginal revenue pair, placing the additional revenue the firm gets when they produce that many units. So as we increase our quantity, what happens to our change in revenue? At that first unit, marginal revenue and demand are the very same. They are the very same because when we sell our first unit, we get, at $6.50, we get $6.50 in additional revenue. But then, as we cut the price and sell more stuff, we are going to, yes, get more revenue by selling more things. That's the output effect. But we give up, now selling at a lower price, what we could have made at that higher price. So there's that trade-off. So at 3, marginal revenue is $4.50. At 4, it's $3.50. At 5, it's $2.50. At 6, it's $1.50. At 7, it's 50 cents. At 8, it's negative 50 cents. 9, it's negative $1.50. And at 10, it's negative $2.50. So all we need to do then is connect the dots, as we like to do. And we should get a nice straight line that we can call marginal revenue. Cool? Okay. Now, one more thing. Let's compare the output and income effect to see how we get this curve. We can look at it right here. Let's say our first price is $5. Let's call it price P high. Okay? When we put in a price of $5, we're going to see that our quantity is 4. So I'll call that our QDL for our particular example. We can make that bigger. Okay? Now, what happens to our total revenue when we cut the price to sell another unit? Right now, my total revenue would be what? It's price high times QD low. And that's going to be $5 times 4 units. That's $20. Well, let's cut the price to $4.50. Okay? Let's call that price lower, $4.50. If I put in a price of $4.50, law of demand, very conveniently, we go from A to B along the demand curve, and our quantity demanded goes up to 5. Neat. My total revenue has changed, right? My total revenue goes from P high times QDL to P low times QD high. And that's now going to be $4.50 times 5, and that's $22.50. Right? We have a change in revenue from selling more stuff. But what is it? What is it? Well, we've made a trade-off here. By selling more stuff, we have gained ourselves this output effect. What is this output effect? It is a rectangle of area 1 times 450. We've added $4.50 from selling one more unit. But in doing so, we've given up the income effect. We are now selling, instead of selling 40 units at $5, 5 units at $4.50. So what has happened? We have taken 50 cents less on 4 units. We have given up an income effect of $2. That rectangle is a $2 loss in revenue from cutting the price. Well, as we said, marginal revenue is the output effect minus the income effect. Correct? It is output minus income. Here, we added 450. We took away $2. And 450 minus $2 is 250. What is my marginal revenue at 5 units? It's 250. Right? Pretty cool. My additional revenue is what I gained from selling more units, but what I've given up by cutting the price on all the units. Pretty awesome. I know. Now, so long as your marginal revenue is greater than 0, by cutting the price and increasing the quantity, your marginal revenue will be positive. That means you're going to add something to revenue. At some point, marginal revenue will be negative, and as you cut the price to increase your quantity, you're going to actually add negative additional revenue. So we're going to want to keep that in mind. You want to cut the price, increase the quantity demanded, you probably want to have a positive marginal revenue without even having any other information at hand. So that's why demand is downward sloping, and more importantly, why marginal revenue is now downward sloping and below the demand curve. Output versus income effects. All right, let's now look at optimal behavior for the firm in monopolistic competition. Firms exist to maximize profits. In order to maximize profits, what will we do? That's right, marginal revenues equal marginal cost. In order to choose the optimal amount of quantity to produce, we find where MR equals MC, and that will give us the biggest total revenue compared to total cost that we feasibly can generate. So we'll set our marginal revenue curve equal to our marginal cost curve and pick our quantity. To get our price, using that quantity, we'll go up to our demand curve and then measure that price that we can charge. Yes, we have some influence over price, but if we want to maximize profits, we will set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost and then see what demand tells us to charge as far as the price goes. We would like to set a price that will clear the number of units that we have produced. So we'll use MR equals MC to choose our quantity. We'll go up to the demand curve and we'll measure that on our price axis, or y-axis on our graph. Then to see our profit, we will measure it with, again, price minus average total cost, all times quantity. Profit's the difference between the price and the cost to produce the average unit for all the units that we produce. We found it as an area of a rectangle in our previous chapter, and this approach will give us the biggest possible rectangle that we can have regardless of what the situation is. So let's draw a general graph for illustration, and then we'll build on our specific numerical example to get some more detail. So got a monopolistically competitive firm model started with prices, revenues, and costs on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis. Let's get going. Our demand curve is now downward sloping. We are not price takers anymore in this market structure. And we just took a few minutes to derive our marginal revenue curve. It's where? Downward sloping and below demand. Downward sloping and below demand. Okay? Now, my marginal cost, supply curve will again be upward sloping. Our marginal cost is supply for the firm. And one more thing. The average total cost curve. Let's have it do something like this. Let's have it do something like this. Okay? Now, this is an approach to use. This is the methodology we use. Again, we'll do it mathematically as you go on in economics, but here we'll model this just fine graphically. This is an approach to use not a picture to memorize, because I don't know specifically where my marginal costs are going to be and where my average costs are going to be when I do an actual problem for a particular firm. So we've got to think through the process. Trust the process, everyone. How do we maximize profits? We set marginal revenues equal to marginal costs. Find where your marginal revenues and your marginal costs are the same. That will tell you the amount of units to produce that will maximize your profits. Okay? Awesome. When we find where they're equal, that tells us the quantity to produce. So I'll call that Q mon com. This is our choice. We're going to make this much stuff. Q mon com. 100 units, 1,000 units, doesn't matter what it is. Now, well, I mean, it matters. It's this number right here. But it could be any number as long as it's where marginal revenues equal marginal costs. To get our price, what will we do? Well, our demand curve tells us our consumers' willingness to pay, their marginal benefit to participate in buying this good or service. So in order to see what we can charge, we're going to make this much stuff. What we want to do is go up to the demand curve, hit the demand curve, and basically hang a left. Measure the price that we can charge our consumers. This tells us we're going to make this much stuff. What's the highest price we can charge and still sell it to all these consumers who we're interested in? All these pretty high price buyers. Okay? All right, now to see our profits, again, our formula is what? Price minus average cost gives us our per unit profit. And then when we multiply that times Q, we'll get profit for all the units that we actually do generate. So again, we're going to use this quantity where MR equals MC. And now I'm going to go up and find my average total cost curve so that now I have price, average cost, and quantity. So go up to ATC, hang a left, and I see that my price in this case is greater than my average cost. So I'm making a per unit profit, and I'm doing that Q mon com number of times. So I've got this distance happening this number of times. So I've got price minus average cost times quantity. That is a rectangle with the area labeled here. We've got economic profits. What would profits be if average costs were way up here? Negative. Remember that from our chapter 12 lecture. Or your average cost could be way down here and you could get a giant profit. Be sure to label whatever that price minus average total cost rectangle is so that I'm sure that I know you understand where profits are. Right. Now, let's do a specific example. All right. Let's build on our prior work now to fill in this specific numerical example for our monopolistically competitive firm. So first, let's calculate our marginal costs, which we know as the change in total cost over the change in quantity. So we've done this a bunch of times now. My marginal cost, right, at 0 units, as we make a first unit, my cost will change from 6 to 9. So my marginal cost is then what? 3. 9 minus 6 over 1 minus 0. We've done a bunch of times. Now, as I produce each second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, up to 10th unit, my marginal costs are simply, in this case, going to be some pretty simple subtraction as we move down the rows. So as I build a second unit of whatever this is, I go from 9 to 1050, so we got a marginal cost of 150. Then to 11 is 50 cents in additional cost of production. Then from 11 to 12 is 1. From 12 to 13.50 is 1.50. From 13.50 to 15 is 1.50 again. From 15 to 18 is 3. From 18 to 21 is 3. From 21 to 24.50 is 3.50. And from 24.50 to 28.50 is 4. So these are our marginal cost calculations. Cool. Right, our average total cost we've calculated before, and that is simply what? That is going to be just my total cost divided by my quantity. So at first, no average. But what's going to happen as we move down this table? My total cost will be total cost divided by Q. So the first one will be 9 divided by 1 is 9. The second one will be 10.50 divided by 2, which is 5.25. My third one will be 11 divided by 3, which is 3.67. My fourth one, let's see here, 12 divided by, where are we at? Oh, 12 divided by 4. Oh, we do that one. That's 3. Then 13.50 divided by, let's see here, 5 will be 2.70. $2.70 that is. And then we will have, let's see here, 15 divided by 6. So 2.50. Then 18 divided by 7, 257. And then 21 divided by 8, 263. Let's see here, 24.50 divided by 9 should be 272. We're going back up. Got our U shape going. Come down, and now we're increasing again. And then finally, let's see here, we've got 28.50 divided by 10, so 2.85. All right, so we've calculated our average total costs. It's going to be convenient. Marker caps, as is tradition in here. All right, and then now let's talk about our profit pie. That will simply be total revenue minus total costs. Since this is a total concept, we have something to put in this very first box on the top row. And that is, my profits are 0 minus 6 equals -6. So we've got a profit of -6 if we make no units. Then we're going to work down our table. We're going to have total revenue of 650 minus 9 being -250. So if we produce a unit, we're going to thankfully increase our negative profit away from the negatives towards 0. And as we keep producing, our next one will be, let's see, 12 minus 1050 would be a positive 150. Break out of the red and the black. Let's make that a little nicer. Cool. All right, next, 1650 minus 11 will give us a profit of 550. If we make 4 units, we'll get 20 in revenue versus 12 in cost to produce. Gives a profit of 8. Then 2250 versus 1350 would give us a profit, an economic profit of 9. 24 versus 15 is 9 again. 2450 versus 18 will be 650. Oh, we're going down. Marginal cost must have overtaken marginal revenue. Am I right? Yeah. All right, next 24 versus 21 is 3. And then 2250 versus 2450, -2. We've gone way too far now if we keep producing. And then finally, 20 minus 2050 is -850. Oh, yes. Cool. All right, so we filled that in. Perfect. Or no one's here to tell me it's not. It's a very empty classroom in here. Let's now take this data and build on our previous work, deriving demand and marginal revenue for the firm. So let's plot our marginal cost and our average total cost so we can make an optimal decision to maximize profits. Let's plot that marginal cost. Now at 1, my marginal cost is 3. At 2, it's 150. At 3, it's 50 cents. Right, our marginal cost is coming down. Maybe we're specializing and dividing labor. But now it's going to start working its way back up. So at 4, it's 1. We're going to start seeing here some kind of increase in our diminishing marginal returns, the variable input. At 5, our marginal revenue is 150. At 6, it's 150. At 7, it appears to be 3. At 8, it appears to be 3. At 9, it's 350. At 10, it's 4. So our marginal cost curve kind of dips and then starts working its way back up. And we'll call that our marginal cost supply curve. Cool? All right. Now let's plot our average total cost curve. At a quantity of 1, we're off the chart a little bit. I'll have to cheat a little bit. Let's say our average total costs are 9. Let's let that be 9. At 2, it's going to be 525. At 3, it will be 367. At 4, it will be 3. At 5, my average total costs will be 270. At 6, they'll be 250. At 7, looks like we're going up a little, 257. At 8, 263. At 9, 272. And at 10, 283. So my average total cost is kind of a general U shape. It's doing something like this. I'll move my demand label here to make it more clear. In case you're watching in black and white, you've got a computer from the 80s, it's all green or something. Cool, look at that. Everything looks lovely for our firm here. Now, when we want to make our optimal decisions regarding behavior, we always start with marginal revenue equals marginal costs. So, what we want to do is look down our table and find the place where they're equal. Here they are. This is going to be the place that will maximize your profits. So I'm going to tell you right away, it's going to be a quantity of 6 at a price of 4. Why is that? It follows our logic of if your marginal revenues are greater than your marginal cost, you're going to want to keep producing. If you make that first unit, right, and you add $6.50 to your revenue, and you add $3 to your costs, you're going to make the firm $6.50 minus $3.50 better off. Your profit's going to go from -6 up to -250, right? That is a clear signal to produce. If you make another unit, if you make that second unit, now you're going to add $5.50 in revenue and only $1.50 in additional costs. What's going to happen to your profits? They're going to go up by what? Huh? We're going to go from -250 to $1.50 because $5.50 minus $1.50 is a $4 increase in profits. Are you going to keep producing? Absolutely. Absolutely you will. All right. Now what? Now what? Are you going to make a third unit? What's going to happen then? If you make a third unit, you're going to add $4.50 in revenues and 50 cents in cost. You're going to add $4 again to your profits. Your profits are going to go from $1.50 to $5.50. So long as your additional revenue is greater than your additional cost, you are going to make the firm better off. If you're making that fifth unit, right, you are going to be adding $2.50 in additional revenue and $1.50 in additional cost. You're going to make your profits go from 8 to 9. What are you going to do? My profits are going up. Let's make another unit. You make that sixth unit. Now you add as much to revenues as to costs, and it tells you what? My marginal revenues are the same as my marginal costs. I'm adding just as much to my revenues as to my costs. It's time to stop. This is where the decisions get made. At $1.50, marginal revenues equal marginal costs. Let's make that bigger and better. MR equals MC. Okay. What does that tell you? It tells you to produce 6 units. That is your profit maximizing quantity decision. Now to get your price and your profit, everything builds on this quantity where MR equals MC. Use this quantity and go up to the demand curve to see what price you should charge. So at a quantity of 6, if we go up to that demand curve and now hang a left, our price is $4. This is what we should charge. And our revenues in total will be 6 times 4, $24 in total revenues. That's pretty swell. All right. To get profits now, we use our formula. Again, price minus average total cost, all times quantity. And we've got a price of 4. We've got a quantity of 6. Now we just need to find our average total cost. So when we're producing 6 units, our average total cost is $2.50. We go up and measure that. Say that's $2.50. That's pretty close. That's our average total cost. What does that mean? Our average total cost of $2.50 means that as we produce, sorry, what that means is at a price of 4, what that means is if our price is 4 and our average total cost was $2.50, we have a per unit profit of $1.50. We make $1.50 on each unit 6 times, and so our profit will be 150 times 6, $9. We have this rectangle of price minus average total cost happening 6 times. And that is how the firm maximizes its decisions and maximizes its profits. All right, next, we're going to talk about the firm and the element of time. If the firm is making a profit in our short run analysis that we just conducted, there's still low barriers to entry here. Ease of entry is high. So if you are making a profit, other firms will enter the market. In a monopolistically competitive market, you'll see this frequently with, say, a restaurant or a bar. When one opens in an area and is successful, what happens around it? A bunch of other similar but slightly different bars or restaurants will open nearby. So someone sees that a profit is to be had and others flock to it, hoping to make their own lives better. So what happens when firms join? The market supply curve shifts to the right. Well, we learned that in Chapter 3. We went over it in Chapter 12 as well. Whenever there's new firms, new entrants, we get a larger horizontal sum for supply. So the market supply curve shifts out to the right. What this does, and what we'll show graphically in a moment, is that the demand curve for the individual monopolistically competitive company will shift in and become more elastic as consumers basically demand less at every price. We saw that in perfect competition when new firms joined, existing firms become a smaller share of the market. They become even less important than they already were. Well, here, we're going to get demand shift in for the firm and demand become more elastic. It's going to start to look more like a perfectly competitive market. So the demand curve, if it's vertical, it's going to flatten out. And if it's out to the right, it's going to shift down and in to the left. Why? Well, it's shifting to the left because people need less of you. There's other firms that they can substitute to. Why is it flattening out? Well, it's becoming more elastic. When there's more substitutes, demand tends to be more elastic. So it's going to flatten out as basically your consumers become more sensitive to your price. If you're the only bar or restaurant in town, if you change your price a little bit, people can't substitute away very much. They're still going to show up for the most part. But if now there's a bunch of other competitors nearby, they're going to be much more reactive to changes in price for you. So you're going to see your demand curve go down and flatten out. So the marginal revenue curve comes out of that demand curve. So when demand shifts down and to the left and flattens out and becomes more elastic, marginal revenue will do the same thing. It will shift to the left and it will flatten out as well. It will still be downward sloping and below demand, but it will follow suit with the demand curve. This will happen until existing firms make zero economic profits, just like in perfect competition. As long as there are short-run profits to be had, other firms are going to look at this, think it's attractive, and want to join. So what we're going to show now is a short-run scenario in which profits are being had, and then there will be entry of new firms into the market. What will happen is the demand curve in the long run is going to shift in and flatten out until it is just tangent to or just barely touching the average cost curve. Because when demand equals average cost, that means price equals average cost, and profits will be zero. Normal economic profits are the expectation in monopolistic competition and perfect competition. So let's check this out. All right, so on the left, we're going to have a monopolistically competitive firm in the short run. So put price, revenues, and costs on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. On the right, we'll start with virtually the same thing. We're going to call that monopolistically competitive firm in the long run. Okay? So, first let's look at the short run. Let's reiterate this. Repetition is good for learning. Let's say we have a scenario. This is our demand curve, and this is our marginal revenue curve, okay? Let's have average total costs go up. Sorry, marginal costs, supply curve, be upward sloping for the most part. And then let's have our average total cost curve be U-shaped, and let's have it do something like this in this case. All right. To maximize profits, what do? We set marginal revenues equal marginal costs. There they are. In order to choose our optimal situation, our optimal quantity. To get our price, we go up to demand and measure that on our price axis. And then to get profits, we go up to the average total cost curve. There it is, up from quantity up to ATC. And in this case, our profit rectangle is here, price minus average cost times quantity. So again, that's the short run scenario, and that's a nice short run. Got a big box of profits right here for this particular company. Now, if ease of entry is high, if other firms can join the market, what we'll see is pressure for other firms to want to replicate this situation. They're going to want to get profits too. The invisible hand is basically going to tell them, do better with your life, go get profits. So let's draw this scenario going from the short run to the long run. I'm going to kind of cartoonishly replicate this short run. Let's say here's our demand curve. I'm going to make it pretty inelastic and vertical and have it drawn like this. And then I'm going to have our marginal revenue be better. Let's just do this. It's fine. Our marginal revenue like this in the short run. It's fine with me. And let's have our marginal cost supply doing something like this. Okay? Now, let's say our average total cost curve is doing something like this. So that our short run scenario is similar. It's going to look a little different. I'll just let you see a lot of versions of this. But what are we going to produce? We're going to find our marginal revenue equals marginal cost in the short run. And that's going to give us our quantity short run by going up to the demand curve. It's going to give us our price of the short run. Okay? And what's our profit going to be? We go up to the average total cost curve. You can see that we have price in the short run versus our average cost in the short run. And there's going to be a big box of profits. Price minus average cost, all times quantity. Right? I'm not going to label that because I want to leave some room here. In fact, just to clear this up, let's get rid of these marginal revenue, marginal cost for now. You know where they are. They're on your notes. I want my drawing to be pretty clear here. As we go into the long run, more firms join the market. What that does is it drives the supply curve at the market level up, but for our individual little companies, demand is going to shift down into the left, and it's going to become more elastic. It's going to flatten out because there's more substitutes. Your consumers don't need you as much anymore, and if you do change your price, they can run away from you a lot more easily when there's other substitutes. So what we'll see is the demand curve is going to shift down and in continuously until profits are zero. Meaning what? My price and my average cost have to equal. There's going to be pressure for this thing to start shifting in and down, flattening out until something like this happens. As this curve is going to flatten out, it's going to be shifting in and flattening out until we get a tangency point just where average total cost and demand barely touch. They touch just infinitesimally smallly one time. Now, as this is happening, your marginal revenue curve is also shifting in and flattening out. Such that that's your marginal revenue long run curve. This is your marginal revenue in the long run curve. Such that what? When firms are now making their optimal marginal revenue, marginal cost decision, where is that? The profit maximizing decision of the firm now is at this lower intersection of marginal revenue and marginal costs. The price we charge is less than what we could have charged before. So we've seen price go down, we've seen quantity go down, because you're now a less important part of the market as competition steps up. Demand's going to shift down and in. It's down because people are substituting away from you, and it's flattening out, becoming more elastic, because with that substitution, demand becomes more elastic. People, if you want to raise your price, you're going to lose a lot more consumers. You're going to be very sensitive to price when there's more restaurants, bars, whatever it is around. And this continues until price and average cost are the same, and profits in the long run are zero. Awesome. All right, here you have basically your study guide for what just transpired. In the short run, the firm produces where your marginal revenue equals your marginal cost. That's how they choose quantity. They set their price using the demand curve, and you find your profits as price minus average cost times quantity. If this is a profit, when we move to the long run, other firms see that and they enter the market too. The demand curve then shifts in and flattens out, and they do so until there are zero economic profits, where average total costs equals the demand curve. Now let's compare perfect competition, our prior market structure, with monopolistic competition, our current market structure. In the long run, both firms face zero economic profits. However, there's some differences, because in monopolistic competition, price is going to be greater than marginal costs, and firms don't produce at minimum average total costs. So two things that were very key, productive and allocative efficiency, in perfect competition are not going to hold true here. So let's compare these two graphically, and we'll see how monopolistic competition has excess capacity. That is, they're not producing as much as they could in order to be efficient. Let's check it out. Yeah, screen resizing and stuff. Right, so on the left, we're going to have a perfectly competitive firm in its long-run situation. And then over yonder, we're going to have our monopolistically competitive firm in its long-run scenario. So let's model these. For my PC firm and my monopolistically competitive firm, prices, revenues, and costs on each y-axis. Okay? So let's check it out. To review, firms in perfect competition are price takers. Good. That is, they receive their demand marginal revenue curve based on whatever the market price is. So they see this price in the market, and they know that that's their perfectly elastic horizontal demand curve. They can sell all they want at that market price if they so choose. To maximize profits, what are we going to do? Say it 70 times while I draw this. We're going to set our marginal revenues equal to our marginal costs. So we found where MR equals MC. We quantify that, and we choose to produce that much stuff, QPC amount of stuff. Cool? Cool. How do we get our profits? We go and we find our average total costs. In a perfect competition, in the long run, economic profits are zero because price and average cost are the same. Okay? Member? I member. Hope you member too. Right. Now, let's talk about monopolistic competition in the long run. It has a downward sloping demand curve. And it has a marginal revenue curve that is downward sloping and below demand. But what this thing has is going to be slightly different because it's going to have an average total cost curve that is somewhere just tangent to the demand curve. Somewhere just touching it on its way down. Let's fix this up a little bit. There we go. All right. So this firm is also going to choose its optimal quantity by setting marginal revenues equal to marginal cost. So where that transpires, we label our MR and our MC, and we say that is our optimal quantity. Then to get our price, we go up to the demand curve. In the long run, will be where average total cost and demand are just tangent. We'll call that price mon comp. And it's also average cost. The two are equal, so our profits are exactly zero. Our economic profits are zero for both perfect competition and monopolistic competition. And that is due to the free ease of entry and exit and the high ease of entry and exit. Okay, so those are our long run pictures for a little review. Now, what does this do for efficiency? In perfect competition, we had productive and allocative efficiency. Productive efficiency, don't forget, is where the firm is maximizing profits as it minimizes its cost. the quantity they choose to produce to make themselves best off also minimizes cost per unit of production, no waste. They also have allocative efficiency. The marginal benefit to the consumer, the price they pay, is the same as the marginal cost to produce the last unit, the profit maximizing unit, so that the value the consumer gets is the same as the cost of production. Monopolistic competition, we've got neither. In fact, only in perfect competition do we have productive and allocative efficiency. In no other market structure will we observe these. So let's look at them on our graphs. In perfect competition, productive efficiency, again, is where my optimal quantity is the same as Q min cost, the lowest production level cost per unit, or where we can produce for the lowest cost per unit. Let's call it Q min cost like that, so it's easier to read. Q min cost. This is what the firms want to do, QPC, where their MR and MC are the same and they maximize profits. It just so happens that because of free entry and exit and being price takers, those two will be the same. So they have to minimize costs in order to maximize their profits, or else they're basically going to take a loss and go out of business. We also have allocative efficiency. Because the marginal benefit to the consumer, the price, is the same as the marginal cost to produce. Right? Marginal cost equals marginal benefits. On both sides, the firm's marginal cost to produce is the same as the consumer's marginal benefit, that is, their willingness to pay for the good. This forces efficiency in the market. Everything's just dandy. Do we have that in monopolistic competition? We do not. Why? Because this is the profit maximizing quantity, Q min cost. Where's Q min cost? Well, it's at the bottom of our average total cost curve where marginal cost and average cost intersect. It's right there, Q min cost. This is called excess capacity, the difference between the two. This is excess capacity because my Q min cost is much higher than what we choose to produce. We don't care about minimizing costs. We care about maximizing profits. And so we're not going to produce at least cost. Now, what about allocative efficiency? Do marginal benefits to consumer equal marginal costs to production at the margin here? No, they don't. Because, why? Because price is greater than marginal cost. Right here, my price exceeds my marginal cost. My marginal benefit to the consumer is greater than marginal cost. What does that mean? That means that they can extract a high price from you. These firms can charge you a high price, and you'll pay it. They're getting something out of you. But there's a trade-off here because, well, 1 second. That was 1 second. There's the trade-off here because consumers get a product that is specific to their tastes. Here, you get to buy a good or a service that is differentiated and appealing to exactly what you want. That is, you can go to the type of restaurant you felt like going to and go to the type of bar you felt like going to. So there is, in effect, a trade-off in terms of efficiency and variety. There's a trade-off in terms of efficiency versus variety. In perfect competition, there's no variety. An orange is an orange, take it or leave it. In monopolistic competition, the firms in the market, again, are slightly differentiated such that you can get what you want according to your personal preferences. It's not just an orange is an orange anymore. Now a restaurant This could be an Indian restaurant and you feel like Indian tonight. This could be a Korean restaurant, you feel like Korean tonight. Specific to you. So here price is greater than marginal cost, and we're not producing at minimum costs. But you as a consumer basically can pick what you want in terms of a unique product or service that's at least differentiated in some way to something you feel like eating or drinking tonight. Now, firms try to stay ahead of the long run. Firms will try and stay ahead of the long run the best they can. They do that through further differentiating the good or service. So a monopolistically competitive company is going to try and perpetually stay ahead of the long run so that they can maintain their economic profits. Now, no one can stave off the long run forever. But you can try using things like marketing and advertising, innovation, and the law. So let's go through those kind of one at a time and talk about how we can try and fight the long run and keep it from happening, right? In perfect competition, there's free ease of entry and exit. Long run's coming. But in monopolistic competition, right, if you can keep changing things or convincing people you're changing things, you can push off the long run for a while. You can make sure that there's at least a little bit of a barrier to entry that keeps firms from joining the market and competing away your profits. So, first, marketing and advertising. A lot of marketing is about generating demand. That's the advertising side of this, and why a lot of people are attracted to marketing. They want to be, an ad exec or something like this in that industry. What you're trying to do really is increase and educate. You want to increase awareness of the product, educate people that it exists or what its traits are, and associate it with things that are good or demand generating, like youth and quality and just being super hip and cool and fun, right? It's why you get, James Harden to be in all of your State Farm ads. You want to associate this product, home insurance, I guess, for some reason, with James Harden and his awesome step back 3-point shot. I'm not in marketing. I don't make these decisions. But they're trying to tell you to buy this good. You need it in order to be like James Harden. Further, you can innovate the good. You can actually physically or conceptually try to make the good further different than the competition. If you keep further differentiating your good, then it can't become more homogeneous and your demand curve can't shift in and flatten out quite so fast. Basically, this is an attempt to keep consumers from being able to substitute away from you, to be able to run away and go to your competitors. This is why restaurants and bars have specials. This is why they change the menu. They are trying to always be a little bit different and always a little bit interesting and not let anybody catch up to whatever it is specifically they're doing. So you're always going to see companies that are not in competitive markets trying to differentiate their good or service. Okay? And then last, we can use the law. You can do things like trademark your name so that it stays unique and competitors can't use it for your own gain. You can, say Coke doesn't equal soda. If you're a soda company and you start up, you can't use the name Coke because it's trademarked. You can use the law to protect your ideas. So in terms of our graphical analysis, what these three things do is keep the demand curve from shifting in and flattening out quite so fast. So what we've had happen as we've gone from the short run to the long run is have demand shift in and flatten out. And we don't want that to happen. What's the goal for all of you managers and marketing majors when it comes to this? Right? What we've had happen here in a lot of these scenarios of our short run to long run is having a demand curve. We'll call this not ideal. We've had our demand curve shift in and flatten out. That is, people don't need you, and they can run away from you and be responsive to your price. What we're trying to do, let's call this ideal with a smiley face, through advertising, through innovating, through marketing, is you want to shift out the demand curve and make it more inelastic and make it more vertical. So, monopolistically competitive firms are firms with many firms in the market selling a differentiated product with a high ease of entry or low barrier to entry. And they choose their profits just like any other firm. They set their marginal revenues equal to their marginal costs. They use the demand curve to find their price. And we can observe their profits by looking at price minus average cost times quantity. When we get to the long run, we will see those profits be eliminated, but we're basically foreshadowing to our next market structures and saying, by not having allocative and total efficiency, if a market is not perfectly competitive, it is not going to be a fully efficient market. Total surplus is not going to be as big as it could be if we were in a competitive market. The trade-off, though, is that we get variety. We're talking about getting a product that is specific to your tastes, and you can go pick it and make your life better by going to that restaurant or that bar that makes you happiest. All right, we will talk soon. Stay safe, stay healthy. Go UT.